Thanks for those joining us today. Just to begin with, to let you know, the event will be recorded today and it will be shared publicly. So if you don't want any audio or video to be used in the recording, please just stay on mute. You'll be able to ask your questions in the chat, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end if that's required. Just to give you a bit of visibility on what we're going to run through today. So my name's James, I'm the account director here at Transparity, focused on the financial services and insurance sector. We're going to run through some fantastic content. We've got Philip from Microsoft joining us today, as you can see there, Executive Advisor for Insurance, AI and Data Strategy at Microsoft. Andrew from First Central, Digital Workspace Director, and then Jodie later on here, Chief Data and AI Officer at Transparity. So what we're going to run through today is a bit of a level set on the insurance sector and AI within that. I'm going to talk through some of the success that First Central are having, some of the sort of cultural impacts of AI in insurance that they're experiencing, and then touch a little bit on how Transparity are helping organisations in the sector to sort of accelerate their plans around AI. That's part of it as well, though. Just to give you a little bit of a view on Transparity for those that haven't joined us before, we are Microsoft UK's most accredited managed service partner. We are a pure play Microsoft partner, and we've been delivering change on the Microsoft Cloud since 2015. So I am now going to very happily hand over to Philip and let you, Rick, Phil, with an opportunity to give everybody a bit of a level set on what's going on in the industry. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Team Transparency, and thanks everybody for joining this. I hope this is a nice lunch break for you, or maybe I'm just in between this presentation and lunch, but let's see. So I've prepared a few slides, and obviously Microsoft is all in on AI. Heard about our deep partnerships with some of the major players. Well, let me just take one step back before we dive into things. This statement comes from our CEO, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. And this is what we see in all industries, but specifically in financial services and even more in insurance. If we look at the incredible rise of ChatGPT, you see here, it was introduced in November of 2022, and it had over 100 million users in 2 months. And you see that mobile phone, internet, Facebook, it took them much, much longer. So it's taking the world very fast, and so many people are taking advantage of this. There are actually two aspects. So we have the classical AI, which we have been using for many, many years, the machine learning models, deep reasoning. And these models have been particularly good with numbers, finding anomalies, helping us with pricing, especially in a dynamic market as that of the UK, where PCWs play an important role. Well, since 2022, we now have a new, let's say, aspect to it, which is generative AI, or the large language models, whatever you want to call it. And we see that in that space, we are now opening a new world where we can interact with natural language, and that's being done on a large scale. And we see a ton of customers of ours doing pilots, doing very transformative things. And I will get on to that and be more specific on some great use cases. What I think is the most interesting part of this slide is where these two circles intersect, right? So that is the space where you combine the two. You combine the machine learning insights and the generative AI capabilities. And I have a very nice example of one of our customers who's doing that. So this is all sounding awesome and great, but then this article landed. MIT did a study, and they stated that 95% of the Gen AI pilots fail because companies try to avoid friction. So if you read into the article, then it's not so much about the tech. It is much more about culture, about organization, about making decisions on how to move further. So I'm still, and we are still very positive on the opportunity that's out there for insurers, for brokers, and so many others in the financial services industry to leverage this to the max. If you look into this report from BCG and look first on the left side, you see that insurance is one of the top industries when it comes to embracing generative AI. They come in second. But on the right side, you see that there's a ton of piloting being done, but how to scale this? I think that is the most common question that I and my colleagues get. Can you help us to scale this and really help us move the needle? How can we reduce our expense ratio? How can we impact our claims handling cost? And how can we grow our GWP or even improve NPS scores by leveraging this technology? Well, one of the things that obviously complicates things in this industry is there's a ton of legacy out there. It's an industry that is not famous for the level of innovation, and I don't want to insult you, but I've checked this with so many people in the industry. And there's a cultural aspect to it, right? Because your business is about risk, is about how to calculate risk. And there is a culture of accuracy. And generative AI, as you probably know, is a probabilistic system, which is something different than an exact outcome. Still, there's a lot of value to this. So when we look at this report from IDC, you can see that when they were interviewing execs, CIOs in the financial services industry, they expect a return on investment out of every single dollar invested of 4.2. And that is important because that number was 3.4 in the survey of 2023. So we see that there's more value being seen that can be taken out of this new tech. We have started to come up with the terminology frontier or frontier firm. So that's what we want to do. We want to help the frontier customers to leverage this to the max. And that goes, let's say, through 4 pillars. We want to help to enrich that employee experience and make their lives more convenient. But at the same time, we also want to help with the customer journey and actually reinvent that interaction that you have. So use people where it really matters, where you can really have an impact, and use AI where it's possible, it's responsible, and it works well. Then thirdly, this is also an opportunity to rethink your business processes. It's an incredible technology that gives you the opportunity to rethink things that you've been doing for decades. Should we continue this, doing this in the same way? We sometimes call this sprinkling AI because that's what's currently happening. So everybody gets a bit of AI on top of what they're doing, their tools that they already had, and it makes it a little bit more easy and a little bit more sophisticated. But that will not move the needle. That is not the impact that the execs or the street is looking for. And then finally, there's the bending the curve, right? So it also provides you opportunity to innovate, to think about unique IP that you have within your organization and leverage that, monetize that, maybe put that in a commercial marketplace and get revenue out of that. But innovation could mean a ton of things. Well, when we think about the human with an assistant, we tend to call that phase one. And we're in the midst of that, right? Almost everybody uses some kind of ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, what have you. So we're pretty used to this, right? We have a question and then we get an answer. And then maybe we have a follow-up question. But we are already moving in phase two, where there's agents around us who are coaching us. And you can already see that happening in Teams, for example, for those of you who use Teams, where Teams is telling you, hey, you still have 7 minutes to go. You need to wrap up. By the way, shall I make you some notes? So already we have agents who are active in the work environment. But the next big thing will be that you will have an army of agents. So humans will have the oversight of multiple agents who are constantly doing things for them without the need of human intervention. There's the need of human oversight. And obviously, don't get me wrong, you need to set guardrails, you need to test this, you need to guide these agents, create these, build these, and maintain this. But there's a big opportunity for all of us to leverage this in so many aspects of our business life. So this is a very high-level architecture slide, but this is how we envision this. So you have the Copilot, which we call the UI for AI. That's the interface that you work with. And depending on who you are you a business user or are you an engineer? So the business users would probably create their own agents with Copilot Studio, while the engineers tend to use Azure AI Foundry, where you can pick your model and make very sophisticated agents. And then there will be that army of agents that comes first party from Microsoft. You build them yourself, or you buy these agents from companies like LSEG, Moody's, and who have you, who all play a role of themselves and can work collectively together. When we look at our research for insurance, then we see that these three use cases pop up most. We see a ton of engagements in the claim space, as well as in customer service and then in underwriting. These are the most popular areas where our insurance customers look after and look into. But obviously, there is also a role to play in every single aspect of your business. Think about your legal team, how they could leverage this tech. Think about your developers. We've seen incredible cases where developers use GitHub Copilot and increase their productivity by 30% or even more. And there's so many other departments, finance, sales. It's relevant for everybody in the organization. Well, I spoke with you about these multi-agents, that multi-agent architecture, or also called agentic AI. So here you see an example from one of our customers in Asia. This is in the health insurance space. So what they created here at the top, there's an orchestrator agent. It's like a conductor of an orchestra. And they have all the individual agents who play very specific roles. At the bottom of the slide, for example, you can see a medical agent who is trained to only look into medical data and medical information. But there's also a compliance and governance agent who looks over this and sees if this is a responsible way of working. Well, at the end of the day, the agents start working on a request and then report that back to the orchestrator. The orchestrator synthesizes that, brings that all together, looks at the guardrails that has been set, and then brings it back to the underwriter. This is just one aspect, We also have this one from a European insurer. You see, this is a European claims form, and we've worked with them to read this and digitize this. This is human-led working for many, many people, but now they have been able to, with a relatively high accuracy, digitize it and then create an agentic process around this. So you have that form, but there's an orchestrator agent that is then looking into the policy admin and see if there's actually coverage for this claim. And then you go into the processing of the claim with different outcomes. Obviously, they started with not the most complex car incidents with bodily injury, but with simple claims. But it looks very, very promising. And they think that they can reduce half of the cost that they're currently spending on handling claims. Well, we're slowly moving towards the end of my presentation, but I just want to share a few other examples that we've been working on with customers. So you see, we've been looking at these three categories: claims, underwriting, and customer service. So the rectangulars on the top left side indicate what it has to do with. So we see market study, for example, they are leveraging the transcription summarization or call summarization function. So what they do is they summarize every single phone call from speech to text and then summarize that into just a few sentences. That not only saves time, and think about 3 to 4 minutes after every single call. So that's a huge saving. They handle over 800,000 calls a year, but it's also very convenient for the agents itself, because they now can listen intentionally to the story of the customer without needing to make scribblings and then worry about that there's such a lot of pressure and workload, because within 5 to 10 seconds after the call has been finalized, they get that summarization on the screen. They can make adjustments, and if it's good, then they can submit it into the CRM system or make some small adjustments if needed. If I go to the top right end, there's Manulife, a insurer headquartered in Canada. And coming back to one of my first slides of the combination of machine learning and Gen AI, that's exactly what they did. So Manulife found out customers who has a high propensity of buying some of their life products in Asia. And then they put that in front of their outbound call centers and let them engage with these customers by sending out a generated letter, which is tailored to their needs with a product that has a high relevancy to them. I moved down to AXA, where you probably heard about concrete type RAAC, where buildings could collapse. And AXA UK wanted to know, have they underwritten these types of buildings? So they had to go through 70,000 multi-page documents, including PDFs, hand scribblings. It would take them over a year to go through this. But with Gen AI, they've done it in a week. Out of this came 65 cases. These 65 cases have been investigated, and 4 cases were actually real relevant cases that they had to double down on. And finally, Ensure, a broker in the US operating in 50 states, had a huge challenge with the incoming emails, complaints, claims. So we built a generative AI model for them that reads the incoming emails and prioritizes that. So think about a claim that gets a high priority. And what it does is it brings together people who should work on this claim within Ensure, but the system is also able to pre-populate an answer. And these are just a few examples of what they've done. They've also used this technology on the other side of the business where they get requests for quotations. And the generative AI machine is able to read these incoming information and can automatically send out a message to the customer and say, could you be so kind to send us a picture or some kind of proving letter of so-and-so before we can give you a quote. So moving towards the end, these are a few of the guidelines I would like to give you. So when you move into the world of generative AI or AI in more broad, 3 aspects are super important, which is leadership and mindset. There's the organizational setup, and you need, obviously, data. So for all these things, there's a ton of help, and Transparency is more than happy to work with you on that, to create that. What I've seen being very successful is that this comes all the way from the top, from the board, who says to the business leaders, we expect you to deliver X amount of value, and we're going to distribute that across the division of our organization. At the same time, obviously, you need to work on the quality of your data, make sure that you have the right people who can do it for you, and make decisions on where you want to invest your money. Because as I said, if you're going to sprinkle AI across the company in every division, you will not move the needle. So take a bold step and rethink where you want to invest, and that will bring you a return. So to finally close off, at the end of the day, it's Nike, right? Just do it. So happy to take some questions. I thank you for your attention. Unfortunately, I'm at a conference, so I need to jump out of this call at the bottom of the hour.
Thanks.
Are there any questions I can take? Anybody? I see in the chat slides. Yes, I will curate the slides, but then they can be shared. But first, some curation on my end. If there are no further questions, I'm happy to hand over back to the Transparency team.
Yeah, thanks so much, Philip. Really appreciate your time today, and thanks for joining us. We'll let you drop away when you need to. We're going to jump into a segment now with Andrew from First Central. We're just going to talk through some real-world learnings from his experiences of deploying AI and his responsibilities. So I suppose first and foremost, Andrew, I hand it to you. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you all. So Andrew Charge, so I'm Digital Workspace Director at First Central. So First Central is a motor and home insurance company, obviously growing every year. And obviously thank you for the invite today. It's really good to come and talk to a large audience that's passionate around digital workspace and actually in our industry of like what the changes with insurance. I think we're all currently at a precipice of how AI is evolving and how it's actually going to, one, disrupt the market, disrupt, obviously our businesses and how we can utilize it in a way. And plus also we'll talk about today is how our people are thinking about AI and actually the common conception of, is it going to replace me in my job, and how are we, supporting our teams and colleagues in this evolution of change. And I think it's such a really good discussion that we're going to have today. So I'll walk through some bits today. Obviously, please put your Q&A into the chat, and also we'll have time at the end for some Q&A as well. So ultimately, my job as Digital Workspace Director at First Central is to lead the strategy on our digital workspace environment, also bringing together how the digital workspace is felt across technology. And we've digitally called it digital workspace, not workplace, because technology is evolving so much that my previous roles as IT director and IT operations director, and also through the technical stack, is evolving so much now that people need a technology day-to-day that works for them. We often focus heavily on how we service our customers and external customers or others, our partners with technology, but no one's looking at so much of that. How does it work internally? How do you all feel around technology today? I think all of us can relate to how, you log on, does your technology environment work for you? Do you have the tools, the applications, does the systems, the processes, does it give you what you need today to be able to work effectively? So you know what, you don't have to worry about it, and then you can just do your job. So my job is to obviously work with people, connect and deliver value, and obviously look at the combined enterprise-wide technology stack to actually focus on modernization, automation, and obviously from a user perspective, Gen AI, whilst our overall AI strategy sits within the tech pillar, obviously that sits with another director from a customer perspective. Overall, I'm one of the cogs in that AI strategy, and obviously it's a very exciting time that we have for Central that we're doing today.
So I guess that leads Andrew quite nicely on to perhaps giving us a bit of a view of how First Central as an organisation are thinking about AI. As you mentioned there's sort of a bit of a split there, isn't there? There's been sort of customer facing and insurance-led product lines, and then also, as Philip mentioned earlier, the more sort of common use cases across every organisation. What's the kind of split there? Obviously, First Central have had long-standing investment in data and RPA, but how are you now thinking about AI as you move forward as an organisation?
Yeah, we've, if we take a step back and think about back office, front office. So front office is obviously supporting our customers, obviously who buy our policies, and obviously back office, those back office functions that support, data operations. And obviously I'm looking at the back office function and also how I can support, the evolution of agents we bring in our AI. Does it support any work with those other teams? Does it support any front office function? So obviously I'm doing is I'm finalising our work-based strategy, and obviously what that does is it transforms our traditional IT, which, and I'll say this in my own role, is traditional IT operations, I think, is it's dying, it's a dying breed, it's archaic, where actually we need to use new technologies and embrace this technology to benefit our day-to-day, and driving the business to be future ready. That's through integration, environments focused on productivity, focused on engagement, satisfaction. So you're kind of looking at the same metrics around ENPS and NPS, but how your people use it day to day. Then obviously overlaying that with kind of traditional RPA models, that we have certain robotics people. So how we then support those functions to actually, with our support teams, to move them to enable those AI skills with them. So most people will think, well, is that going to replace my job? I think we don't know the answer. I think what we need to embrace now is well, as obviously, we're working with Microsoft and Transparity, is that first evolution of how we can use Gen AI in the back office functions as a support to our existing teams to enable them day to day, get rid of a lot of that day to day kind of autonomous, repetitive kind of rubbish that people have, and then elevate them to be able to do the more value add items, work strategically with the business, engage the business, not just focus on kind of just ticket after ticket after ticket, and actually what value do they bring? Most people see back office functions as a cost of doing business, when I actually believe that the back office functions generate so much for a business, and actually they can be revenue creators, or not just traditional kind of risk avoiders, etc. So again, we're heavily invested in actually how does that sit in the business as well. But obviously the most important thing is how we start looking at using Copilot agents. Obviously we have Microsoft House, we have other third parties that are looking at their own areas regarding Gen AI. But ultimately, how we can start looking at those agents of benefit, and what we might benefit is talked about before, is how we can shift some of those very kind of traditional workloads we have in RPA models, and also some of the day-to-day churn into more intelligent day-to-day functions around that. But one of the biggest the challenges I think is around culture, where whilst we talk about it throughout the day and other parts, is that all of us have to embrace this change. James and I have caught up, and I think the technology evolution that we're seeing today, the investment, the drive, especially if for me, I relate it to the moon race, where you had the USA and Russia trying to get to the moon. Now you see the USA and China and other countries who's got the best AI, who's investing in AI. And actually, what we're not talking about as much is that all of us need to kind of get on this journey. You know, how do we all learn this? And I think it's a mindset change. It's no longer technology pushing out updates to business people that just use technology, but all of us, as we get these tools, we need to be able to be, you know, we need to be inquisitive. We need to understand the technology. And I think no longer now, I think over the coming, you know, year to 18 months, can you just rock up and be like, oh, I don't know how to use Word and Excel and, you know, some other Office apps. I think you've got to be able to learn this technology on your own time with the support of others. And I think that is one of the biggest cultural adaptations that we have to face in today.
Absolutely. I suppose it's one cultural piece there is, you know, the culture of an organization and how that impacts adoption of technology. But I suppose the other one is the culture of insurance businesses as a whole. I think one of the things I suppose I'd like to share with the audience around how I feel First Central have been very proactive in that is there's almost because you have split that strategy around kind of front and back office, there's almost a healthy tension between those two in terms of who takes things forward, where you sort of keep each other in check, where, you know, if it's a front office piece, it really needs to deliver kind of IP and value to your business for you to be willing to invest in it. And then really everything else falls into that, hey, should we go and extend or buy things off the shelf? And it's a very pragmatic way to approach things. And I think to Philip's point earlier, I think it's what's helping you guys to ultimately scale. So rather than just being sat in pilot land forever, it's actually allowing you to move forward and perhaps not get stuck in this landscape of regulatory, you know, limbo, I suppose, that a lot of insurance businesses are in. I guess what have been some of the other things that you've learned about trying to take this forward in an insurance business specifically?
I think, as talked about earlier, I think the pace of change of trying to onboard, obviously, and you know, the cultural shift and change. I do generally believe that. So we've obviously changed the internal IT ops team. We've rebranded. We've looked at, we've changed, but the rebrand from kind of front operations is more that it's a cultural shift. It's a mindset shift, where ultimately I think a lot of people that relate in my field is for a long time worked in a certain way, and you have to adapt. I think back office functions, I think the evolution of change is a continuity. The adaptation cycle now is so much shorter to new technology, where I think, you know, last 15, 20 years, you'd get new technology. Like if you think about it, like Windows OSs, they release a new OS every kind of 3 to 4 years, and you'd have 3 to 4 years to learn that and then move on. Now the pace of Gen AI is weekly, it's daily, you know, and I think that is one of the challenges is how do you service a business of today, and then how do you also evolutionize into the new? And some of the biggest challenges is really about trying to prioritize the areas that provide the biggest value to the tech, to create space. The space is, I think, the most important thing on a day-to-day. So the strategy of digital workplace is more than just about onboarding Gen AI. It's around changing the technology landscape and culture and behaviors. That's why it's not just around the tech, to enable people to have the free time, the skills, the expertise to be able to use this tool. Because due to like COVID and working from home, a lot of people have become quite insular and they spend a lot of time meetings. Everyone knows that meeting burnout, back-to-back meetings. So if I give you, Jennifer, a tool today to use, how would you fit in learning Copilot? How would you do that? You'd probably go, I don't have enough time. How do I learn prompt engineering? How do I learn it? So we have to create space. And that's what the strategy does, is it looks at the end-to-end journey of how people use technology, how people use their day-to-day, working with the people pillar, of how we support those colleagues, with development, the data pillar in regards to their overall AI strategy, and then bringing that together. So the biggest challenge, I think, is around cultural change, I think, to onboarding technology.
I suppose that sort of leads on nicely. You talk there around, you know, giving people space and making cultural change. What sort of impact, you know, good and bad, do you see from these technologies? And more than anything, to try and give your staff the best possible opportunity, how are you trying to get ahead of that and prepare for what that looks like?
So we already roll out some data literacy from the data team. We've got training. We also work with others of the business in regards to kind of safe use of Gen AI as well. And also we're building some parts as well around education. But what we're trying to do is roll out a base layer of cultural shift and education into that. But I think some of the areas around education, some of the areas, I think the challenges we face is just prioritizing the right things to be able to do that. Plus also from the front office function, because also we are a regulated business, we have to make sure that ultimately we are looking after customers, and the customer journey, the business is the most important thing. So again, obviously with the back office functions, we have a little bit more flexibility to be able to, support that and make changes.
I suppose we talked a lot about the skills required for end users to adopt the tools, the digital literacy and the cultural change. But there's another thing entirely to bring these tools, to your organisation, to your users in the first place. So how are you getting that balance right between building internal skills for things that are maybe more static, but then also perhaps partnering where you need knowledge of things that are changing on a day-by-day basis?
Yeah. So my personal view, I think you've got to look at every business, and what you do is, what do you want to be a specialist in? So for us, the balance is, I think it's how most people, we've always looked to doing it, is where the growth and change is so quick, you need to bring in expertise to help learn your internal teams who have those skill sets, plus at the same time educate and help evolve your internal teams, because you can't do it without each other. And then from there, you both grow together. And then obviously your internal teams have the business knowledge and context, because we've all done it before. We've brought in a partner, they don't understand the business, they deploy some stuff and get terribly wrong because they don't have business context. So I think it's a symbiotic relationship and growth in that culture that together, collectively, you can grow and bring those expertise. So for us, it's around, the internal teams know the business, know the teams, know the challenges. Where can we bring in agents and Copilot to help drive the business? And then work with those partners who have those skill sets to then turn around some of those challenges quickly, whilst the internal teams get to know how to use these tools. So then in time, both teams can build at the same time, rapid pace, because by creating that space, working with a partner, about earlier, you're then giving space for internal teams to have that capacity, I think, then to grow.
Brilliant, yeah, and I guess that's some of the areas we work with you on in terms of GitHub Copilot with the development teams, obviously spearheading some of the work we've done around the initial Copilot deployment, and now starting to look into agents is sort of a good example to avoid Philip's earlier statement where he was talking about just sort of getting stuck in that analysis paralysis world where you don't really take anything forward. So it's a really good opportunity. I think that's a pretty good segue to hand over to Jodie now to talk about how we're working with customers to drive AI skills and our approach to the market more broadly. So Jodie, over to you.
Thank you both. I was just thinking you've teed me up so nicely there, so thank you. It was a really insightful discussion. For those of you who I haven't met before on this call, my name's Jodie Ashwood and I'm the Chief Data and AI Officer here at Transparity. And for just the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to talk you through our new AI factory and why we believe it can kind of solve a lot of the challenges that we've seen that organisations are facing today, and a lot of the challenges that we've already heard come up on this call so far. So since the launch of generative AI, and I cannot believe it's been 3 years already, but we've seen various stages of AI maturity already within our clients. And I think as discussed earlier today, a lot of organizations have been initially experimenting through things like pilots to really just actually get to grips with AI and to understand its capability. What can AI do for our organization and what can't it do for our organization, right? It shouldn't be, and it isn't the answer to everything. And I feel like we've now got to a stage where most organizations we're working with, they do really see and believe the value that AI can provide. And now they've moved into more of what I would call kind of a preparation phase. So the question that, most leaders we're working with right now are asking is, how can we make sure that our organization is really seizing the full potential of AI, but at the same time, we are making sure we're kind of safeguarding our business, our data, our IP, and also our employees as well. So, again, this is really similar to some of the challenges we've heard today, but we do think there are these consistent blockers that organizations are facing when they're looking at going from this kind of experimentation mode into actually implementing AI across their business operations. And, much like Philip spoke to earlier on, and we've just heard from Andrew and James, these challenges are much more about people and process as they are to kind of do with technology. And when we work with organizations and we're really assessing their AI readiness and their AI maturity, we typically kind of see 5 different axes, and these are your users, your infrastructure, your development, your governance, and then, importantly, that alignment to your business KPIs. And we're really seeing that those organizations who are struggling to scale are usually stuck without things like governance, change management, enablement, without reusable patterns within their infrastructure and their development. So we're talking about kind of building blocks of capability that they can reuse across their organization. And also that lack of clarity around how their AI strategy really aligns with their business strategy. And these 2 things shouldn't be siloed. They shouldn't be separate. They should really be kind of the same thing, right? AI is one of many enablers for your business strategy. So to answer for this and to kind of support with those challenges, we've launched a new concept that we're calling our AI factory. And this is really to focus on those 5 different axes of maturity. So bringing your users along through enablement, really clearly mapping your business priorities to your AI initiatives, helping you to build scalable infrastructure with monitoring, developing a use case or a product factory with those repeatable building blocks, and all whilst also bringing your kind of legal risk and compliance teams along on the journey. And our AI factory is made up of these kind of 3 components. So this really is our holistic answer to how we think organizations could be building their AI strategies, and how you could be consistently developing and deploying your AI use cases or products in a really standardized, responsible way on top of reliable AI-ready infrastructure. So what this offering kind of gives you is access to a cross-functional team of experts at Transparity to kind of bolster your own expertise and capabilities. Much like Andrew mentioned earlier, we see that your business a lot more than we ever will, but we can really help you to kind of bring all of those use cases together, prioritize them, check the feasibility, and kind of build out this kind of 3 horizon roadmap. And that really is what component 1 looks to do. So the business and AI journey to value. We know that AI has completely changed how information is now used, and this evolution is far greater than just reporting. It's really about embedding analytics, intelligence, and kind of automation into your workflows, helping you to kind of streamline your production processes, and also really changing how your customers are interacting with your company. So for this component 1, what we aim to do here is to really kind of help you to either establish or to extend your kind of existing centers of excellence. Many people today already have kind of technology centers of excellence, automation, power platform centers of excellence. So it's really helping you to kind of extend that methodology, build a working group to really identify and prioritize your use cases. And the output of this is typically a roadmap which will help to identify the feasibility of those alongside the kind of enablement and adoption change management needs. And typically we'll go into kind of envisioning alongside, a business analyst on our side, an AI consultant, and move more into that kind of solution envisioning. So first of all, what are the business problems? How could AI potentially enable you to solve for them? And then what does that solution potentially look like? And something else that's been quite popular with clients as well is this concept of rapid prototyping. So sometimes, it's just taking a really small part of that use case and proving whether it's actually going to kind of be feasible, whether it's going to add value. And it really helps organizations get to that kind of go, no go decision with specific use cases. So component 1 is typically supported from our side by our change and adoption management team, a business analyst, an enterprise solution architect, and also kind of our AI consultants. Component 2 is much more around really establishing that trust in your foundational architecture. So, we know kind of rubbish in, rubbish out. So this is really looking at your data platform and supporting your data strategy alongside your AI strategy in parallel. This is really reviewing your landing zones to make sure they've been hardened for AI, as well as your security and governance posture. So again, you can kind of provide that confidence on your approach to your legal risk and compliance teams. And this is led again by an enterprise solution architect on our side and really supported by our Azure data security and governance consultants. And then finally, component 3 is really to empower your organization to innovate more quickly. And again, I think this is another big question that we're hearing often is how do we really accelerate that change? And our answer to that is this kind of AI scale engine, which ultimately is an experimentation factory. So it's where ideas can be acted on and tested really quickly. So those that are successful can then be moved quickly into production or inserted into your kind of existing processes. But this platform also comes with that rigor and guardrails around how to help make sure that innovation's adding value to your business versus just being a kind of technology experiment, but it's also being implemented in a really consistent and efficient, responsible way. So it's not only giving you that increased time to value, but it's also coming with that peace of mind as well. So completely appreciate that was a really quick tour of what the AI factory looks like. If any of those components sound like they would be of interest, then please do kind of reach out to the team to schedule an additional session. We're more than happy to go into kind of more detail on what this offering looks like and to discuss your kind of specific needs. We do really appreciate that, whilst we're providing kind of a framework and a methodology, that each of your organizations are completely unique and you might have started this journey already as well. So there is flexibility built into this approach, so we can kind of support in an initial discovery phase, or even just start with a single component like the AI envisioning workshops or just that foundational architecture review. So please do feel free to reach out if any of the areas that I've spoken to today are of interest. And I think for now, I'm handing you back over to James for any outstanding questions and just to touch on next steps a little bit more as well. So thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jodie. Appreciate the time and sharing this with everybody today. We've now got a bit of time left for Q&A, so you're more than welcome, anybody on the call now, to either come off mute and ask questions if you want to address them directly to anybody in the room, or feel free to pop them in the chat and we will pick them up. A little bit of time in case people want to do that. Meter.
Hi, right. So my question is, what 3 takeaways could you give the audience for people that are really starting to look at their adoption journeys and enablement journeys, in terms of organizations where, they're not huge organizations, and so some of the processes and principles around kind of, champions and digital ambassadors and, making approaches and enablement efficient and relevant to the size of an organization, what 3 key considerations would you give the audience when it comes to enablement and adoption?
Yes, I don't know. Jodie, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think really initially when we start to support organizations with adoption and change management, we'll always do kind of a bit of a discovery call in terms of that baseline of where you are currently and where you want to get to. And I think that looks completely different for every organization. I think the formats of learning are really important. We all learn differently, and providing different options, I think, is the best way to go. So there's so much incredible content on Microsoft Learn, things like Prompt Buddy in terms of just being able to share those really effective prompts and kind of keeping things top of mind for people. And then reinforcement learning. So I think this is a new habit that everyone is building ultimately. And I think, if we're honest with ourselves, we've still got a long way to go in terms of digital literacy, let alone AI literacy. So I do really think that reinforcement learning, it's not a one and done, but how do you help your organization to really build habits around this, is probably my top tip. But yeah, more than happy to dive into it for specific companies, but they'll probably be my top of mind things. I don't know, James, Andrew, if you've got anything to share.
I think it's just make a bit of a plan, maybe it's a straw man plan. Some of the challenges I faced is you trying to jump in too quickly, and then other things kind of, can take over. So I think just take a step back, have a think regarding who your stakeholders are, your funding, how you actually deploy this, the maturity of your business, and how is it actually going to be done? And when's it planned for? And then will people actually understand it? Because it's no point just throwing a tool at someone, which we started off with because people didn't know how to use it. And then it's I think that the biggest part is how do you then continuously keep that learning up to date? Because it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop change. Most tools you give to people are static once they've learned them. Not many things happen, but now every day it changes. I think that's the key takeaways that I would say be ready for.
Yeah, really a reinforcement point on stakeholder management as well. I think a lot of the engagements we've seen, I think everyone knows that AI's got a bit of a buzz, and some might say hype around it at the moment, and that all organisations feel like they need to be doing something. I think it's the responsibility of leaders to really make sure that when they're embarking on a journey and deploying AI into their organisation, that they really stand behind it and deliver it over a period of time, and it's not just a sort of one and done exercise. I think what we see quite often is people maybe wanting AI for the wrong reasons, to be seen to be doing something with it, whereas I think you really need to entrench it in the behaviour of your organisation. And I think it's really important on that basis as well that leaders sort of practice what they preach. It's no good coming out saying how AI is very important to your organisation and why everybody should adopt it, and then finding that everybody in the leadership team at all levels is just sort of carrying on with traditional behaviour and not really embracing those tools. So I think that's a really key one to try and drive. I know it's not always easy, and the stakeholders are always lacking time in many instances, but it's like anything else, right? If we want the payoff, we need to put the work in to get the outcome.
Yeah, so I echo that. The pressure, I'm not gonna lie, I've said that there might be people on here, from a candidate, I was under huge pressure with the buzz of AI to buy Copilot licenses for everyone. And I said no, because I don't think our business was ready. I don't think we had the training in place. I don't think we had the expertise. I didn't even know, my own learning was ready. So I think if I'd have bought them, they'd have sat there on my budget for the last year, and I would have paid for a year of Copilot licenses, and that would have been a waste of funding. So, and then your stakeholders in turn the business go, we spent this money, got nothing out of it. So, well, then adoption stops because people don't. So, if you're going to do it, so we've done a literally place of small and trialing. So, really understand your stakeholders and what's their understanding of Gen AI, and is it a hype or is it actually what's the outcome? And the outcome should be what you're focused on.
Absolutely. And I think taking that process as well also helps to tease out what people really want from AI. So again, I think being caught up in that buzz and the hype means that a lot of people say they want it because they want AI, but actually when you strip behind it and say, well, why are we really driving it? Then by learning over a period of time means that people start to realise what they truly want. You start to get those metrics that people are seeking, which helps you to then validate the work that you are delivering and the success that you have. I think if you try and embark on this, like any technology, without really knowing why you're doing it, it often just leads to people asking questions as to whether they've spent the money in the right places or whether they've got the return on investment that they wanted.
Yeah. The analogy, James will hate this, and I was thinking me on the call headphone is it's if you could ride a bike and I give you a Ferrari on your driveway, it looks lovely, it sounds great, but if you don't know how to drive a car, if you don't know how to even, you don't know theory behind about driving a test, you don't have done a test. It's going to be great for your Instagram photos and your TikToks, but it's not actually going to achieve anything. You're going to drive it, take it to track days, get the best out of it. Eventually, you'll sit there and depreciate, and then you'll sell it. And you'll be like, oh, that was a waste. So that's the analogy that I use.
That's his favourite analogy. I think some CEOs do just want the Instagram post. I think that's part of the problem. But
All for your TikTok, yeah.
All for my TikTok, yeah. I'm not like them. Are there any other questions, Phil? Okay. Well, if anybody does think of anything, obviously feel free to pop it in the chat even after the session is closed. We're more than happy to loop back round and answer anything that anybody needs. Obviously, the one thing here that we're putting out on offer is that we're more than happy to, as Jodie said earlier, book one-to-ones with anybody who maybe appreciate insurance is a regulated industry and everybody wants to share their use cases, ask questions in public. I completely understand that. If you want to reach out to a member of the team and book some time with us to go through that in a bit more detail, where you can discuss your own sort of challenges and ideas, then feel free to do so. But I suppose at the end of this, thank you so much for everybody that has joined us today and giving up your time, whether it's been lunch or otherwise. And we really look forward to speaking with you in the future.